Right, good evening everybody. Welcome to the February Cabinet meeting. Very unusually on a Monday evening. Fire alarm procedures. If the fire alarm is activated, vacate the offices via the stairs. Please do not use the lifts. Assembly in Hawley Square on the Green. Officers will assist you and advise when it's deemed safe to return to the chamber. Please switch off or turn to silent your mobile phones and do not make or receive calls while the meeting is in progress. Please note the meeting is being live streamed for members of the public. The meeting will also be recorded and will be subsequently available on the internet. Does anyone intend to film the meeting? Apparently not. Following members have asked to speak under Council Procedure 20.1. Item 4, Councillors Davis and Yates. Item 5, Councillors Wing and Davis. Item 6, Councillor Rogers. Item 8, Councillor Davis. Item 9, Councillor Davis. Item 11, Councillors Wing, Davis and Yates. Do any other members wish to speak under 20.1? Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Leader. 3, 4 and 5, 8, 9 and 11, please. Thank you.
Okay, nobody else? Right. Right. We will. We don't have any apologies because Cabinet is all here. Declarations of interest in items of business on the agenda this evening. Councillor Duckworth.
Agenda item 6, which is the ground floor refurbishment.
Thank you. I will declare an interest in item 4, which is the draft budget. As I'm a member of the Ramsgate Neighbourhood Board, I have dispensation from the Standards Committee to take part in that item and to vote on it, for which thanks to them. And we'll make a start with item 3. I'm just thinking, do any charter trustees need to declare the same interest? Ingrid, can you advise me on that?
For which one?
On the ground floor offices.
No, it's nothing to do with the charter trustees.
Oh, it's to do with. Oh, it's to do with something. Yeah, I remember what's the trust. Yeah. Sorry. Sorry, Councillor Bright?
Sorry, I'm just trying to see if the depot pin, it's not on this one, is it?
No. Okay, so we're satisfied that nobody needs to declare an interest in respect to the media centre? Good. Okay, let's deal with item... we don't have any minutes, Charles, is that correct?
No minutes because it's an extraordinary.
Sorry?
Because it's an extraordinary meeting.
All right, we've advised we don't have any minutes as it's an extraordinary meeting. So we move straight on to item 3, which is the budget monitoring report. So we've got one budget item coming up on the agenda this evening, which is coming back from scrutiny. Before we get to that, we need to look at our current financial performance, which provides a vital evidence base for the decisions we're making tonight in respect of the Q3 monitoring report. Covers our general fund revenue and capital forecast to the end of December 2025 alongside the housing revenue account. So the headline figure is a significant forecast general fund revenue overspend of 3.234 million for the current financial year. If this level of overspend materialises, our earmark reserves will fall below 6 million by the end of March, a level that places our long-term financial sustainability at heightened risk. It's critical to understand these overspends are not failures of operational control, but due to systemic demand-led pressures. Two services alone, homelessness and housing benefit, account for 64% of this total forecast pressure. In homelessness, we're facing a 550,000 pressure due to the high cost of nightly paid temporary accommodation, and we also see a shortfall in housing benefit caused by a subsidy gap, where government reimbursement remains frozen at 2011 levels. In cleansing, we're addressing an £830,000 pressure, largely due to high sickness levels and the subsequent reliance on agency staff. So this monitoring report is the direct catalyst for the 26-27 budget strategy, which we'll be considering next. By utilising recurring pension savings and core funding uplifts, we are matching our resources to actual demand levels in these critical services for the coming year. We're also using our asset disposal programme as a strategic measure to de-risk the council by removing high liability maintenance burdens and generating the capital receipts needed to reinvest across the rest of the portfolio. Finally, the report notes significant slippage in the capital programme, primarily due to the complexity of our local regeneration schemes. In the housing revenue account, we are currently forecasting a modest surplus of £27,000 despite ongoing pressures and repairs and maintenance. I move the recommendations and formally endorse the alignment of next year's budget strategy to these structural pressures, but I will read out the recommendations. That is to note the forecast 25-26 general fund revenue overspend of 3.234 million and the projected impact reserves. Formally endorse the alignment of the 26-27 budget strategy to these pressures, specifically the rebasing of budgets for homelessness, housing benefit and cleansing. Endorse the acceleration of the asset disposal programme as a strategic de-risking measure to reduce the council's long-term maintenance and compliance liabilities. Note the housing revenue account and capital programme positions as detailed in the annexes. Recommend to council for approval the supplementary capital budget numbered I as set out in section 10.4 in annex 1 to the report, and approve the capital programme budget adjustments numbered I to III as set out in 10.5 and annex 1 to this report. So I move all of that, and Councillor Bright is seconding it, and Councillor Austin wishes to speak under 20 point.
Thank you, Leader, and thanks to the finance team for putting this together and for everybody who's contributed to it. We strongly support the strategy we have around temporary accommodation, the better support for cleansing staff who are at the sharpest point of the front line, and the work that they do makes a massive difference to us all. But the sad truth is that central government is massively underfunding local authorities, and we are under particular pressures. We've got things like the costs of planning appeals, which are contributing to our deficit, which means that the planning committee inevitably feels reluctant to make a decision that might lead to an appeal. It squashes us and reduces our democratic rights, I believe. And this can only get worse with planned planning regulation and local government reorganisation. So I'm wondering, this is probably not the first time I'll ask this question this evening, have we contacted the government to complain about the situation that we find ourselves in, along with so many other authorities? Thank you.
Well, it's an interesting one, isn't it, Councillor Austin, because we've actually seen a significant increase in our resources going into the next financial year, but you're not wrong in terms of the fact that there are challenges which are inherent in the way that the government funds us. Already referred to the reliance on the 2011 local housing allowance figure for housing benefit, which is continuing to cause us and a lot of other authorities problems. I mean, I would say in respect of the planning committee should be reluctant to make decisions which are likely to lead to successful appeals. So I think it's a balance of making the right judgments, and in the case of the appeal in question, the council won that appeal. It spent 90,000 on it. I imagine that the residents of Cliffs End, doesn't affect me, even though I'm a resident of Cliffs End, but I would think that the residents of Cliffs End around there would be grateful to the council and regard that as a good use of public money in this case. What we mustn't do is be reckless, because as we heard at the planning training, there is no budget for planning appeals. They're not things that we predict, and we would wish to avoid them. And we have a pretty good record from what we've been told by Mr Livingston of performance in that respect, but we mustn't be unwilling to defend the decisions of the council when they are justified. I think that's what I would say. I know that we continually make representations about the actual level of funding we receive, and we'll come on to that in relation to the budget in the next item as well. Members. Councillor Bright, do you want to say?
Yeah, I'd just like to add to Councillor Austin's point on the fact that, you know, yes, we have a problem. It's a legacy issue. We're not funded adequately, but I think at least we are tackling the issues that we've got. The work that the Housing Department and Councillor White has been doing with temporary accommodation directly tackles the challenges we have as a council, and I think we should laud them for that. So yeah, I just wanted to make that point.
Councillor Alban.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say anything, Chair, but I just think it's worth saying that, as Councillor Bright's just alluded to, this has been a long process from different parliaments reducing the amount of money that councils get, and unfortunately, at current time, there is a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure being brought to bear, not just on this council, but on most councils across the country. How this government or any other government will resolve it is very difficult to see, because it certainly won't resolve it with a unitary authority. But I'm saying that unitary authority is the best way forward. But I just wanted to say that it's a steady decline over years to be in the state what we're in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Alban. If there's no other comments, members, that's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. And we'll move on to the draft budget for 26-27. So as members will be aware, this is the second appearance of this item at Cabinet. The process is that it is recommended by Cabinet, it goes to overview and scrutiny, and then it comes back here and we make such judgments as we do and recommend them on to full council. It's quite an interesting development in terms of this one, because we're now dealing with a tightening financial landscape in respect to the budget settlement, as we have lower resources than we had when we considered it last time, due to changes between the interim settlement and the final settlement. So in terms of the 26-27 budget, what's material to it is a loss of 185,000, which has changed some of the decisions that we previously proposed at the previous Cabinet meeting. However, rather than cutting services, we have found a smarter way to fund our priorities through a strategic shift that protects our core general fund reserves while delivering for residents. We hold approximately £5 million in recycled Better Care Fund and grant receipts. This is a restricted capital pot intended to improve the independence and health of our residents. By using £310,000 of this funding for the Margate and Ramsgate boardwalks, which we proposed at the last Cabinet meeting, and the Eastcliff lift, which we're introducing at this Cabinet meeting, we're delivering key infrastructure without touching our core general fund. This funding swap allows us to continue this investment while setting a balanced budget without a drawdown from reserves. As explained at Cabinet in January, we're also making significant budget allocations to address systemic demand-led overspends in homelessness, housing benefit and cleansing services. In the light of the upcoming transition to local government reorganisation, rebuilding our financial resilience in this way is the responsible course of action. So to formalise this approach, I'm moving two specific amendments to the recommendation tonight. Firstly, recommendation 5 in the report has been updated to £310,000. So the recommendation now reads, Cabinet approves the inclusion of £310,000 within the capital programme for community accessibility infrastructure, namely Margate Boardwalk, Ramsgate Boardwalk and Coastal Lift refurbishment, to be funded from recycled Better Care Fund receipts, noting that this forms the first phase of the strategic review of Better Care Fund balances set out in Recommendation 6 and subject to the condition of release set out in Section 9. This updated recommendation covers the full scope of the boardwalks and the Eastcliff lift. It's important to note, however, that this spend is subject to a condition of release. We will not commit this expenditure until we have updated our housing assistance policy to ensure we are 100% compliant with the legal requirements of the regulatory reform order. Second, I'm introducing a new recommendation 6, which reads as follows: that Cabinet requests officers to bring forward a report setting out further potential use of the Council's Better Care Fund and recycled grant balances following the adoption of an updated housing assistance policy, and over and above the amount prudently required to meet the needs for disability facility grants and other services currently funded through the Better Care Fund in the district. The purpose of this recommendation is twofold. Firstly, it ensures that we will always keep enough in the pot to meet mandatory disability grants for residents in their own homes. And secondly, it establishes a clear strategic framework for any future spend, ensuring that we don't commit these funds to ad hoc projects. Finally, following the final settlement funding reduction, we are not able to support the revenue-funded lift income pilot that was recommended by Overview and Scrutiny. However, the objectives of this proposal are shared by the administration, and to some extent it duplicates services already being delivered, particularly to our tenants through the Tenant and Leaseholder Service Financial Wellbeing Team, which dealt with nearly 400 referrals in 24-25. Once a referral is made to that team, the team works with the tenant to review their financial circumstances and identify any unclaimed benefits or other sources of support that they may be eligible for. We also grant the Citizens Advice Bureau £137,850 per year on a rolling 3-year service level agreement. In year 24-25, the CAB dealt with 6,878 issues, including 2,788 regarding benefits and tax credits and 966 regarding housing issues. In the last 6 months of 2025, they dealt with 610 housing issues and advice. Moving on to look at the Housing Support Fund, Kent County Council awarded a grant allocation to Thanet District Council of £460,000 for 2025-26, and as of the 31st of December 2025, we've spent £392,000 and will spend the full fund by the 31st of March. As of the 31st of December, 1,321 support awards have been given out, which has helped 718 vulnerable households. And then in terms of discretionary housing payments, currently Housing Options have spent £270,000, helping a total of 215 applicant households in 2025-26. That was rent deposit and rent in advance for 192 households, rent arrears for 21 households, and a shortfall of rent for 2. Remaining in the budget as of the 9th of February was 25-26. There are changes to the national funding mechanisms for 26-27, but the point here is that the Council is working hard to support residents in need and will continue to do so. And I know that what I've said there doesn't entirely replicate what was in the proposal that came to Overview and Scrutiny. What we will say is that if an opportunity arises to do more, then we will look at it, even though we can't accept the proposal from OSP at this time because the money is no longer in the budget. Overall, this budget is balanced and it delivers on the Council's priorities. I move the recommendations as set out in the report, including the updated figures in Recommendation 5 and the new Recommendation 6 as tabled. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Duckworth, thank you. When I've shuffled my pieces of paper, I shall find out. I think Councillor Davis was first under 20.1.
Thank you, Leader. Given what you've just explained about the situation with the change of circumstances and that, that's probably revised a couple of the comments I was going to make in that. I would be very keen, obviously, as would we all, for this to come back to OSP just to discuss these changes. It's ironic that we've lost £185,000 due to a decision of the government that, from what I can see, actually then bolsters KCC. So we have the lunacy of a Labour government not supporting a Labour council but backing up a Reform council who can't make their numbers balance. However, that's down to formulae, no doubt, and so on. So at this point, I would like to, I mean, there are issues that we have, and again, I don't want to take up too much people's time, but, you know, we're still spending another, or at this point, due to spend £190,000 on a survey into selective licensing. That could go such a long way to reducing this shortfall instead of having a speculative survey as to whether to do something that we won't be able to do because we'll be a unitary by then. So I do think there are further savings to be made and further adjustments, And where those are, we will bring forward amendments by agreement with the officers, but in good time, and so it's got time to be considered. So I'm not going to take too much of your time here, other than to implore you, please, to let's have an extraordinary O&S, so that those questions can be revised, or would you suggest that's better off discussed at full council when we bring the budget forward?
It's not for me to convene extraordinary meetings of O&S, as you'll appreciate. I don't think, in practical terms, that you could reasonably have a scrutiny meeting between now and the time of full council. I think you'd have to have it the night before it'd have to be called tomorrow, and it'd have to be the night before full council. I'm not sure that that's feasible, but I'll leave you to discuss that with relevant members and officers, because it's not a matter for me. I would say on a couple of things that you said, Councillor Davis, to be clear, and I accept that this is very complicated, so it's no disrespect, the 185,000 is not anything to do with KCC. It seems to be to do with a miscalculation in the original allocation by MHCLG between district councils in East Kent. That's our best understanding of it, but we have asked MHCLG to explain it to us, and they have agreed to go and look at it. And when we do get an outcome from that, we'll obviously share it with members. But there was a larger sum of money which is to do with KCC, which has been included in this year's budget, because they've given us a grant to cover this year's budget for it, but not the following year's budget. And that's because the government have misunderstood how business rates pooling arrangements play out into settlement figures. You and I might well also misunderstand those, but one would think that MHCLG would be the experts.
If they don't understand it, what chance have we got?
And I'll just comment, I know that you want to make the point about selective licensing. I mean, it's not speculative expenditure, it's very necessary expenditure if a selective licensing scheme is going to be introduced. Most members of the council, I think, was shown at full council, are in favour of a selective licensing scheme. You obviously have a different view, but it certainly wouldn't be prudent not to do the work before we try and introduce one. I think it's a sensible use of resources. Right, let me see what order I've got people down here. Councillor Yates.
Thank you, Leader. We'll just be talking about the resident income maximisation trial. So we in the Green Party have done everything by the book. We've spoken at overview and scrutiny, got unanimous with one abstention support for resident income maximisation trialling a low income family tracker. It's been brought tonight, and now we have a weird situation where the finances have been slightly different. And we don't really have enough time to come up with an alternative, because I don't know when the report was published, but I don't think we had 7 days notice on this information. So that it won't surprise you that we're going to bring this again at full council, because that's what was brought to scrutiny, that's what we're talking about tonight. We would ask for some support from officers so that we can make that balance, and I think that seems fair given that this information is quite fresh. And just reiterating the point of the resident income maximisation trial, this is a policy that Councillor Austin suggested. We've gone away, looked into it. This is a one-year trial. We're not fixing the council's finances permanently. If it works, great. If it doesn't, we end it after 1 year. Other councils have found that it can benefit residents to the tune of £500,000, and the benefits that they get are perpetual. So if you're added to the Southern Water social tariff, then you're added there until you're not no longer on their system. So you'll get that benefit every year, saving you hundreds of pounds. And that's just one of the campaigns that can be managed through the low-income family tracker. So I appreciate everything that's been said tonight with the Better Care Fund, and that you'll look at options, but we would like some time with officers to make that work and bring it forward at full council. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Yates. And I think it was constructive on the part of the Green Party to make that proposal at the overview and scrutiny panel, and respect that. From our perspective, you make the point that there hasn't been enough time to consider it. That's also reasonable. I mean, the reality is that we were faced with this 185,000 figure on Monday, and it did take a few days for officers to agree how it could be managed in terms of the existing budget proposals. So there was nothing sinister in that. It wasn't possible for us to address it earlier. I mean, what I would say to you is, if we still had that money on the table, what I would be saying to you is, I absolutely see that there is merit in some of what you propose. I don't think it has as much merit as is presented in your papers, because I think some of the things we're already doing. There's a presentation here which talks about the benefits which would accrue to the council, but they would actually accrue to the county council, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but isn't actually a financial benefit to this council. It is of a benefit to the community as a whole, and obviously to the local economy. It is something that I would like to look at, and what we would say from the administration's point of view is, we will look for opportunities to revisit this, whatever happens to the proposal at full council, whether it's accepted or voted down. I think there are other ways that we can look at it, and we might be able to do some of the things that it suggests and not other things. I think the best way to deal with that, if money becomes available to deal with it, is through a report to Cabinet and a proper paper which everyone can look at in the context of the council's actions at the moment. Because I think it's very difficult as an opposition party for you to bring forward a proposal that takes into account all the things the council's doing at the moment across the piece, no matter what work you do with officers in the meantime. So we're making a constructive response to it. I can't say what would happen at full council, but I will say that if money becomes available, then we could ask officers to bring a report to Cabinet looking at these things and seeing how it would interact with what we've got here. So that's our position on it, I think. I have another speaker, which is, I think, Councillor Austin, yeah.
Thank you,
You can
Leader.
reply to me then, Councillor Austin.
Sorry, what?
You can respond to the points I've made.
Thank you very much. And yes, I understand where you're coming from, and it's very disappointing for us that this isn't able to be taken forward in the form that we had hoped. We do see that the council is already doing a great deal, but we also see that, for example, our council tax income is going down. So there is an issue there. Sorry, I don't mean it's going down. What I mean is the proportion that we're retrieving is less than we had hoped for the last year. So there are things that we can do that will help us maximise our income, but more particularly and importantly, help residents maximise their income, and we'd like to see that happening. We will speak with officers when they have a moment. We had a couple of other smaller proposals that we were not able to pursue with officers because they were swamped with this work, quite understandably, and we're very grateful to them for what they've done. We are encouraged by the proposals relating to the Better Care Fund, and as one of our original proposals related to the seafront lifts and the possibility of opening the Broadstairs lift through the winter months. That's something we very much hope will come back when the Better Care Fund is looked at more closely. And finally, I said that in an email to you, I think that we wouldn't submit things at the last moment at Budget Council, because I find that sort of adversarial way of doing it between the two old parties quite ridiculous. But obviously we may be right up to the wire with this because of stuff that's not of our doing or anybody else's, and I hope we will be dealt with accordingly. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Councillor Austin. I mean, the point I would make to you is it isn't necessary to do it, even if you can't do it in a formal meeting prior to full council. There's nothing to stop you having a conversation with us outside formal meetings, and we're open to that, and we'll consider practical suggestions. One thing I would say to you is, in respect of what you just said about the seafront lift, I think what you're talking about in Broadstairs is a revenue proposal. I'm not sure that certainly the recycled receipts could be used for. Yes, Mr. Sanham is shaking his head, so I think you might want to look into that. I do want to say something, however, as we're talking about the seafront lifts, about the Eastcliff lift, because that has been really well received. I had to get up very early this morning to go on Radio Kent and talk about it, which I don't particularly like doing. But what I am encouraged about is the extent to which it's recognised. I noticed on Councillor Whitehead's Facebook post, she had something like 143 responses or something, and most of them, there was a little bit of whataboutery, which is what you tend to get, but most of them were very positive. And I think it's a good indication of something which, in many ways, it's a small thing, but it's an important thing for residents, and it's an important signal to people that we care about those things. We care about those things, and the board books, absolutely, obviously, which we discussed at the previous meeting. Members, comments on the latest situation with the budget. Councillor Alban doesn't want to talk about the Eastcliff lift. Very disappointing.
Well, if you push me, Chair, I suppose I will have a say on that. And I think, you know, Ramsgate Town Council have been trying to get some form of it resolved. You know, and a lot of money spent by Ramsgate Town Council with lift engineers and stuff like that. So I'm very, very pleased that we could actually, that TDC could actually, we could come together and get the finances to get the lift repaired. So whether or not Ramsgate Town Council will be able to take it over is another matter, and that's something that we would look into, because I think it's worth it, although it might be difficult for a council to run a lift. I know it sounds a bit dopey, but I mean, it is a bit that we haven't got the wherewithal to do that. But I think there are other things with attached to the Ramsgate lift, which is the concession, which would come in handy if Ramsgate Town Council were to take it over. I would say that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm sure Ms Plant is listening to you anyway, you're talking about the lift. Yeah. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Leader. I'd just like to say how pleased I am at the scope of the accessibility measures that we've been able to bring forward. So considering ones that are due for construction this year in terms of the 2 accessible toilets at Margate and Broadstairs, and finally having accessible toilets on Margate Central Sands. That combined with 2 of the boardwalks and the lift and potentially future measures, I think we can be really proud of ourselves as a council in terms of what we need to do for our residents and what we've actually achieved, because this will make a massive difference to many, many Thanet residents.
Councillor Bright.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar. I mean, this is year 4 of this council, and I think it's my laptop's gone now, so I can't even see what I'm talking about. This is year 4 of this council, and you know, we set out our stall to tackle some of those long-term issues that we'd had in the district of underinvestment in facilities, etc., and the fact that against a really difficult financial backdrop, the overspends that we've talked about and have been well discussed in this council, that officers have managed to allow us to, or enable us to continue that process of regeneration. So I'm so thrilled that Margate and Ramsgate are going to get boardwalks. I think it's brilliant. It's made a real difference to Broadstairs over the last few years, and I would advise anyone not to let their toddler get their head stuck under the boardwalk, because that can happen, as my now 20-year-old son can attest to. Yeah, I'm just really pleased that we've been able to do those things, and particularly, as I've always gone on about, is the lights in the St Peter's Rec that will really allow the Pavilion Youth Cafe to continue operating safely in the winter, because that is a huge benefit to the Beacon Road estate.
Okay. Just before we close on this item, I think we should thank the officers for their work in identifying this funding, because I know that it's not been the simplest exercise, and it's quite an ingenious solution to the problem. So thanks for that. Members, been moved and seconded, so agreed. Thank you. We move on to item 5, which is the lease for a fish processing and canning plant at the Port of Ramsgate. This report proposes to the Cabinet for Council to enter into lease negotiations with an operator who wishes to use land at the Port of Ramsgate to operate a new fish processing and canning plant. The project involves granting a lease for approximately 2,200 square metres of land to a long-established commercial operator. The land will be situated to the north of the port land, near to the roundabout on Military Road. While a previous December 2025 decision focused on short-term income through leases and licences of 1 to 4 years, this specific opportunity requires a longer-term commitment of up to 30 years due to the significant capital investment required by the operator. The lease will be based on commercial market terms and is subject to satisfactory financial and legal due diligence. A primary objective of the Port of Ramsgate Future Delivery Project is to end the current revenue deficit and establish long-term financial viability. The plant will create local jobs, provide market rent income for the council and reduce the environmental impact of transporting goods long distances by road. The operator has a licence requiring them to process shellfish products locally to where they're landed. The council anticipates approximately £10,000 in costs for professional valuations and legal surveying work, which will be offset by the lease income. The tenant will be responsible for the costs associated with high electricity usage, suitable drainage and any necessary service upgrades. Council is being asked to agree that the head of property should negotiate a lease for up to 30 years for the specified land at the port and finalise lease terms and agree the lease following the required due diligence checks. So I move the recommendations. Have a seconder, please. Councillor Keane. And speaking under 20.1, Councillor Wing.
Thank you, Chair. I've got the location up on Google Maps, and I know there's been quite an outpouring from residents as well concerned about the location. In my head, I've sort of got a visit to Boston to go and visit their plant there to see if it is indeed smelly in the summer. I mean, it couldn't be any closer to residential properties, actually, and it could be slightly closer to the beach, which, as we know, is a well-known beach, or the new flats that are being built at the old West Undercliff toilet. So, although I welcome the fact that we're trying to introduce something else into the port, I've got big worries about how close this is. It's right below St Augustine's, a series of flats, a series of houses there, which are, you know, a prominent part of our heritage and places where people. It's not far from Royal Esplanade. The other issue I also have is that we don't seem to have an overall vision for the port. I know we met with one of the wind farms maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and the wind farms were definitely keen in creating a much bigger berth. But at that time they'd been told they couldn't have a bigger berth because we were looking for the mythical ferry. It just doesn't feel to me as if we've got an overall plan for the area of the port. Apart from any old person that comes along with any old business, we're going to give them a bit of a chance, whether it's dumping lorries down there or a canning factory. So I'd really like to see a vision for the whole site, even if we're deciding to sell it. I mean, the Green Campus, I can see some drainages going in there, because they're definitely working on new drainage or new connections down there, because I walk past there every day. But I just don't get a good feeling about what's happening there.
Thank you, Councillor Wing. I think what I'm going to do is let everyone speak under 20.1, and then we'll have some responses, because I suspect some of the things that we said may be overlapping, perhaps. Councillor David.
Thank you, Chair. Some of it does overlap, because I wanted to refer to, and it's a little unfortunate in some ways that people, I guess it's because it's come through so quickly, but there is a lot of concern in the community, and every councillor, I think, has received a letter from the various bodies, or a number of the notable bodies in Ramsgate that are trying to work collaboratively to get effective regeneration and employment in the area. In absolutely no way do we wish to prejudice or speak against anything that will provide jobs or opportunity. But I do think Councillor Wing and a lot of people's concerns are fair and justified, particularly given the location of this. The interesting thing is, although it would appear to be a maritime-related industry and so on, it seems that most of the cockles will be delivered by lorry from the Whitstable fleet rather than being landed here. In which case, we've got a lot of land space that could be used for this, and it wouldn't necessarily. There's a lot of logic with it going quayside. I also want to highlight that this does show the resilience of the fishing industry locally, and it gives the total lie to why the 3.1 million for a fish processing plant was removed and put into the port project. Because with 7 boats increasing to 12 on the local fleet, plus interest like this, and it, you know, let's face it, this is a viable and a real opportunity handled correctly. Should we not perhaps be looking at a more overarching plan that incorporates facilities that will suit our local fishing fleet as well as augmenting the Whitstable catch? In addition to that, I fully support what my colleagues have said. We have been trying to get discussion on a master plan for some years now. Previous administrations were foolish enough not to understand the paperwork and the money that was put in front of them, including a figure of 500 million in principle, which paperwork was provided for. You may not have seen this, Leader, and I can tell you that the notable architects and individuals behind, or companies behind it, would be very happy to come back and have a sensible conversation. In addition to that, we have boat builders with their supporters looking to invest millions down there, and it would make sense perhaps at this point to have a combined conversation so that in the absence of a meaningful master plan, at least the concerns can be addressed. And I would hope that you'd be open to doing that with the investors that are looking to spend, because this is a marvellous opportunity if it's bolted into private investment that is all towards creating better opportunity and employment down there. So whilst we have concerns and recognise those concerns in the community and from those community groups, I don't think they're all, you know, I don't think there's anything that isn't overcomable in the concerns, but it does need robust and good dialogue now so that people know exactly what is on offer rather than edited or selected versions. And perhaps if I can get back to you with those investors, because I have spoken to them in the last week, and perhaps you'd like to have a chat with them when you can see perhaps what could be on offer.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Austin?
Thank you, Leader. I think I'm going to repeat some of what was said, but I'll do it very briefly. The main point, I think, is we do not have a plan. And yet, of course, we do. We have dozens of plans all in a drawer somewhere. Most particularly, we have the WSP High-Level Feasibility Study 2020, which I believe some members of this administration were involved in commissioning, perhaps when this group was in power previously. I'm not sure, but it's before my time as a councillor. But that's on the gov.uk website, just as if it was a serious plan that we'd actually dealt with and whatever, rather than put in a drawer. And it looks at all the different other possibilities that there are, and some of those have been highlighted by the Ramsgate Traders, Ramsgate Space, the other organisations involved in tourism, heritage, etc., who wrote to us all to point out their concerns. These are groups who represent organisations across a variety of different areas, both commercial and community, and they are very concerned about the fact that if we go down this route and make this commitment, we box ourselves into a corner, as we did with Brett's. Nobody wants to be next door to the canning factory. Nobody wants to be next door to Brett's. We have exclusive flats going up. They're not going to want to be next door to the canning factory. Nobody is going to want to go to the beach next door to the canning factory, etc., etc. There are allegations, I don't know how true they are, that the canning factory will be both noisy and smelly. Can I suggest that before we do anything else, we send some people to go and visit this organisation's other depots and see what they're like? If Councillor Davis is right that actually most of the fish or shellfish are going to be coming from Whitstable, then I'm sure we have great places for them on Pisons Road, for example. They don't have to be here where we haven't made any plans yet. Perhaps we have a lovely place they could be right in the centre of Thanet doesn't seem to be doing anything very useful. Seriously though, we need to look at the overall possibilities for the port, and we're not there yet. So while I'm not saying this is a bad idea in principle, and obviously we all welcome the prospect of jobs, I believe it is a premature idea because it ties us down without having an overall plan for what we want to do. We are allowing ourselves to get pushed into a long lease because we're worried about money, and yet once we've got that canning factory in place, will have a negative impact on our land values, will have a negative impact on the other options that can be taken for the port. It's really concerning that we are looking at jumping into this. Yes, the original recommendation was pursue short-term opportunities. This isn't a short-term opportunity. This is going to be round our necks for many years, and I really think that we shouldn't be going down this route, at least yet, until we have a plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. In a minute, I'm going to let Mr Humber come in and talk about the port site and the planning issues. I mean, I'll correct you on one thing. The report that you refer to was commissioned by the Conservative administration. I think I received it as when I was a member of the. Yeah, I received it, but it wasn't something that we commissioned. I think it was then overtaken by COVID, frankly, because a lot of things went out the window. But Mr Humber can come in on that. I just want to talk on, refer to some of the points that have been made. Some of the points that have been made are about planning, really. You know, a planning application will be required. They'll be dealt with through the planning process. Now, yes, we can sit here and say we're not going to consider that because we've got a view about it now. But some of the issues that have been raised are matters for planning and would be considered through planning. So that's not, we're not making decisions about that. Councillor Davis wants to talk about these investors who apparently want to come along and invest in the thing. They're probably related to the people who want to invest in the airport, who we've been hearing about for the last decade. What I do know is, and he will tell me if I'm wrong, that these people came in and they spoke to the Conservative administration. They spoke to, I believe, Ash Ashby and the people in power there. I've spoken to Ash Ashby and I've spoken to other people who were in her cabinet, and they did not take that approach seriously. They did not regard it as a serious approach. Now, I don't know what goes on in the Conservative group. There may be different factions in the Conservative group that have different views of the world. But that was the position as explained to me by the previous administration. I've never heard from them. They've never contacted me. They've never come into the council or tried to come into the council for the whole period of this Labour administration. I think you draw your own conclusions. And the conclusions that I drew a long time ago is that these proposals, these ideas are not likely to be viable, and they are at best unproven. Now, you can't come back, Councillor Davis. You'll have other opportunities to speak on it. So that's the position. If people want to come and talk to us, the door is open. Of course, we'll talk to them. Of course, we'll talk to them. But the reality is, people talk about this stuff, but there is no evidence that it's deliverable. And in terms of a master plan, that would cost hundreds of thousands of pounds and take years. Now, this proposal is coming here to Cabinet because it is not a short-term use. We very clearly said that the proposals for short-term meantime use could be brought forward. This is coming here because it's a 30-year lease. I think it's in the right place in relation to the rest of the port site, but Mr Humber can talk about that. And I'm quite clear that any proposals which are for longer-term use should come to Cabinet, and we should be able to discuss them and consider what the implications of them are. I think I'm going to call in Mr Humber because I think he'd like to talk about the site and the...
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Yeah, you've said a few of the things I might have said, but to talk about, might have said, said, the WSP report, as you say, is a high-level feasibility study. It is not a master plan. It's much higher level than that. An awful lot more detail on economics and on viability would go into master planning. But that suggested multiple uses, and actually that then led to where we went next in the journey on the port around the concession and continuing to try to reuse it for what it was intended for. And obviously we know the history of that. Just talking about the strategic objectives that Cabinet that was in the last Cabinet report in December, they were to end the revenue deficit position for the port, to deliver a sustainable solution for the port in the long term, and to try to deliver that with no local financial contribution. So that's really what the objectives for the port are about. That report talked about 10 options. 6 were discounted and 4 were brought forward. One of those 6 that was discounted was to go through a full master planning process, because it costs an awful lot of money and takes an awful lot of time. And when we come back to that first objective, it's to end the revenue deficit position. So if we take 2 or 3 years to do a master planning process, then we're continuing to have that deficit position. This proposal that's been brought forward, does deliver long-term income. The objectives or the benefits of it are, there will be local jobs as a result of it. It is a new long-term maritime-related business. I hear the comments about it could be elsewhere, but also this could then create sort of local fishing benefits as well. So it could expand the operation. That's not certainly not a part of the proposal at the moment, but it could create that added benefit in the future. In terms of sort of zoning, the location that we're talking about at that end of the port means that it doesn't sort of prevent further major development at the port in the future, remembering that the work that we're doing now is about what the best disposal options are for the port. So we've got to consider what happens next and make sure that this doesn't stifle the ability for new development in the future, whether that's through a long leasehold or a freehold disposal, and it shouldn't do because of where it's located. So I think that's a important point to make. And generally, the advice that we have received, we've been talking to the Department for Business and Trade for some time, and when we're looking at disposal of a site with going concerns, that's generally viewed better by private sector investment or for disposal than trying to dispose of a piece of land where there's no income and there's no business. So we know that we've got wind farm business, we know that we've got Brett Aggregates, and this could be another long-term sustainable business which could, which creates jobs and could develop other interests, maritime interest at the port and harbour. So I think that's the positives of this proposal. And also worth saying as well, the next step is planning, and at the planning stage, some of those concerns I think will be addressed in terms of concerns about noise and odour and things like that.
Yeah, it's remarkable really that we can find ourselves talking about the smell of fish or seafood when we have a fishing fleet which comes in to the Port of Ramsgate or the harbour area. I do think there's a real risk here. We criticise, the council is criticised for the port not paying its way, and when a proposal comes forward which contributes to reducing that problem, we don't want that either, because there are other reasons why we'll object to it. And we're told that it's been referred to tonight that the ferry was apparently a fantasy. We've got what some people would regard as a fantasy project in the middle of Thanet, and now we've got people who want us not to do things in pursuit of what I suggest is another fantasy project in terms of a mixed development on the port. I think that yes, we should have aspiration, but we also have to bite the bullet and get on with things sometimes. This seems to me a proportionate and reasonable thing to bring forward. Members, comment? Councillor Bright.
Yeah, I think these ideas all jammed tomorrow, aren't they? We're going to have luxury flats, we're going to have luxury developments, etc., on a port area where we've got a real opportunity. And I used to go to Whitstable a lot before I moved here. Obviously, I don't go as much anymore because why would you leave Thanet ever? And around that harbour, there is shellfish processing, there is wet fish processing, there's marine cargo, and there's hospitality. All cheek by jowl in a very small space. Now, shellfish, it works there. There's no reason it couldn't work here. And I think for all of the wonderful ideas that these people who just, for some reason, don't speak to the administration of this council when they've got these amazing proposals, I don't know why you would speak to the opposition rather than come to the administration, who are actually the decision-making body. So rather than pursue these fantasy ideas, we've got an opportunity now to bring income into this council now and start to eat away at our deficit, but also give opportunity to our young people. We have an incredibly challenging position in terms of young people who are unemployed and not in education. This is an opportunity to create new jobs for them that is not just a local business, it's part of an international network, or certainly a national network. So that creates growth as well for our young people. And I think this is a really good opportunity. It's a good opportunity for Thanet. It's the right thing to do. So I support this.
Members, anybody else? Councillor.
Yeah, I just wanted to address the issue that Councillor Austin's made, which is on behalf of residents who've basically just got an outlook of what the issue may or may not be about the canning factory. I think the residents are fair. If I was living there, I would be concerned about noise and smell and whatever. Of course I would. Who wouldn't? But as we've said, the whole point of the planning process is to deal with those issues by condition should it be approved. Now, obviously, it might get refused. There's a chance of that, depending who's on the committee at the time, and then that will go to appeal. And we've already talked about that earlier on. But I just think that the residents' issues are real and they need to be taken into account, and that is something that we will do through due process. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wade.
Thank you, Leader. I genuinely cannot think of a more appropriate pairing than a port and fish. So, although referencing Councillor Elban, I fully acknowledge the issues that would be addressed by the planning process, but that's something entirely separate. But the reality is that the historical parts of Ramsgate are not just buildings. It's the industries that were linked to here. It's the professions that grew here. It's lifestyles that built a particular kind of community. And I talk a lot about gentrification in relation to housing, but it is not just a housing issue. And there is a big difference in terms of what we do around areas of work especially, that defines whether something is regeneration or gentrification. With the issue that we've had previously in relation to the local fishing fleet, as has been discussed at many regeneration meetings now, was whether there was the ability to create jobs, because the funding relies specifically on that ability to create jobs. We have at the moment a proposal that could potentially make that much easier and could support local fishing and could support that, so that we do see growth in that area and so that we do see jobs appearing in that area. And so, from my perspective, we're looking very much at the history and the heritage of Ramsgate as a port, as a fishing port, and this is a very logical regenerative activity. Thank you.
Thank you, members. We've had a good discussion around that one. It's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. We move on to item 6. Councillor Duckworth, would you like to leave us for a little while? Okay, item 6. This report is about main office ground floor refurbishment. Outlines a proposal for the refurbishment and reconfiguration of the ground floor of the Council's main office here at Cecil Street. Cabinet's asked to approve the key decision to proceed with the procurement, awarding the contracts to successful bidders where it exceeds the key decision threshold of 250,000. These offices were constructed in 1974 and have undergone minimal refurbishment since that time. I think we might all agree with that. A 2024 condition report highlighted that essential repairs for the building have now escalated to approximately £3.86 million. Following an accommodation review concluded in June 2025, the Council determined that remaining at Cecil Street and refurbishing the space is the most cost-effective long-term solution. The current proposal represents the first phase of this larger refurbishment programme, and obviously the full programme is placed in some doubt by local government reorganisation, I think it's reasonable to say. Primary drivers for the project are relocating Partnership 1 from the Gateway building to the main office to better suit their specific operational needs and reduce disruptions to the public library services, addressing recent safety concerns such as public tailgating by installing new internal access barriers and a dual scan ID badge process to comply with new incoming legislation, and creating a secure bookable ground floor interview room. This dedicated space allows for confidential meetings without requiring members of the public to be escorted through the main office area. So just to remind you, the recommendations to approve the key decision to procure and award the contracts to the successful bidders for the ground floor redesign and refurbishment of the Council's main office in Cecil Street, and to agree that the Director of Corporate Services and the Section 1 final officer shall negotiate the final terms and sign the contracts with the successful bidder. So I propose that. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Alban, thank you. And speaking under 20.1, Councillor Rogers.
Thank you, Leader. In 2019, a survey identified essential repairs costing £2.8 million to the council offices. An updated report in 2024 estimated a cost of £3.8 million. In 7 years, these repairs haven't been done and the cost has escalated. As already stated in this report, the future of Cecil Street is uncertain. Our current finances are under considerable strain. So is it not wise to defer this refurbishment until after the decision in June, when we know that the outcome of local government reorganisation and how it will affect Thanet District Council? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rogers. I mean, what I would say to that is that I think it would be very disappointing in the future if there wasn't a need for Partnership 1 or people doing the job that Partnership 1 do to meet the residents of Thanet. I don't think that we could expect them to travel to Canterbury, Dover or even, God forbid, Ashford in order to engage with people representing the council. So I think that's the first challenge. The second issue is I don't think the public would have wanted us to have spent those sums on this building over the last 7 years, and I think the administrations, both Labour and Conservative, reached that conclusion. Now there is a level at which you do need to invest in a building or before it becomes a problem. I don't know, Ms Plant, do you want to add anything in terms of why this work is important?
Thank you, Leader. The only points that haven't already been addressed is the health and safety element, which is important. So we need to know who's in the building at any given time. And at the moment, tailgating and entering via one scan, multiple people entering the building, there is no definitive number that we know the bodies within the building itself. So were it to be a fire, we wouldn't know how many people we need to account for outside. The 2-level entry system and turntable style entry means that only one person at a time and it will be accounted for. There's also new pieces of legislation which are coming into force soon. Everyone knows about Martin's Law. So we are being on the front foot of this and trying to address those repairs and improvements on the ground floor now so that we can be compliant and offer a safe environment for members of the public and officers.
Thank you. Members? Nothing to say. Okay. That's been moved and seconded. Members, is that agreed? Thank you. Can we get Councillor Duckworth back? Moving on then to item 7, and the evaluation or retention or disposal of 4 housing revenue account assets. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Leader. Tonight we are being asked to consider the disposal of 4 housing revenue account units. These include 1 property, 1 car park and 2 freehold interests. Since the publication of the report, residents have come forward regarding the land at Danehill Row, stating that they have the authority to use the land for parking. We are currently seeking further legal advice. We need to and are very happy to undertake full due diligence of the residents' claims and objections to the disposal before proceeding further. And I would also like to thank everyone who has contacted me and other councillors directly on this point. We do not intend to retain the land, but how it can be disposed of and to whom in what way is still open for discussion. It simply has to be listed for disposal for those conversations to happen. All 4 of these units generate minimal income for the council, in some cases directly costing our tenant and leaseholders for their upkeep. And the residential property is in a very poor condition, which requires over £88,000 of work to repair and refurbish. Disposing of this unit at auction would generate income for the HRA, allowing the council to acquire further properties as part of the Accelerated Affordable Homes programme. The units proposed are as follows. The residential property is 20 Labella Alliance Square, Ramsgate. It is a vacant 3-bedroom property that requires substantial maintenance to be made sufficiently habitable. The car park is located between 4 and 7 Danehill Row, Margate. The council's parking team have confirmed the location is not a parking area as defined by the traffic regulation order. However, it is currently being used as car parking by local residents. Council officers remain in ongoing discussions with the affected residents. The first freehold is 70 to 76 Canterbury Road, Birchington, which contains 4 self-contained flats. And the second freehold contains the Lees, Preston Road, Manston, which contains 26 flats, all of which have a full repairing lease. If sold at their suggested guide prices, these assets are expected to generate approximately £189,300 for the HRA, as well as providing property for regeneration and potentially providing leaseholders and communities with greater control of their properties and assets. Tonight we are asked to dispose of the council-owned property, freeholds and car park, and reinvest the proceeds into the HRA capital programme. I move the recommendation set out in the report, noting again that all disposals relating to existing leaseholders or affected communities are still under discussion in terms of disposal options.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Duckworth, thank you. I'd just like to say on this that I've received a number of emails in relation to the parking space or the land that's used as a car park in Danehill Row. And I know residents were concerned that they hadn't been given enough notice of the proposal, but it seems to me that the consultation mechanism has worked because they contacted us, we're aware of their concerns, and all we're saying is we need to put it on the disposal list in order to take forward the discussions that we need to have with you, really. But we are listening to you. We do need to investigate further, and part of the reason we bring these things forward in a public way and put them on the asset disposal list is so that residents can point out to us things that we may not know. So I think it's, and there are odd pieces of land around the district which have peculiar status. It's not always clear who owns a piece of land. So I would say, and I know that Councillor Whitehead will be keeping an eye on this one in particular, I would say don't panic about it. We're listening to what you're saying to us, but we need to run a process because it isn't a car park, even if it's being used as a car park. Members, any other comments? Councillor Keane.
Thank you. As the ward councillor for the area in Danehill Row, then it's an area I'm very familiar with, and I just wanted to say that I'm really pleased that you are listening to the residents and taking into account all the issues that they're raising, because these are very narrow roads and parking is already an issue. So I'm glad we're really looking at it in the round. Thank you.
And I noted one of the reasons why it couldn't be taken forward as a housing site was because of the conditions in the road. So, I mean, that's obviously important. Members, that's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? Thank you. Moving on to asset management of surplus property, which isn't in the HRA. Councillor Duckworth.
Thank you, Leader. I'd like to thank Overgreen Scrutiny for considering this item. I know there were concerns around disposal of Retort House, and I'd like to give some reassurance that we've no plans to change the current status of the building. It'll be sold with its current legal status. With regard to the scrutiny recommendation regarding the media centre, officers are working hard to agree suitable accommodation for the charge trustees. I'd like to recommend to Cabinet that the sale of the media centre will not be completed until June of this year. Cabinet is asked to support a recommendation for disposal of the surplus assets, which would allow capital receipts from the sales to contribute towards the approved capital programme set out in the medium-term financial plan. These proceeds are to be directly reinvested in the remaining assets the Council retains to fund necessary repairs, maintenance and capital improvements. I move the recommendation to approve the open market disposal of the former toilet block Minas Bay, approve the disposal of Margate Media Centre Margate, approve the asset disposal of Vale Square Gardens Ramsgate by way of private treaty to the current licensee, approve the open market disposal of Retort House Broadstairs, approve the disposal of land at Minas Bay Restaurant by way of private treaty to the lessee, approve the open market disposal of land at Hartstown Road, Margate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duckworth. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Alban. And speaking under 20.1, Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Two of the projects I wanted to just comment on, and I'll deal with the Vale Square one first because I've had quite a lot of connection with people in Vale Square, and historically the gardens have been the source of quite a lot of division within the community because there's a community group there that over a period of time did represent seemingly everybody who was subscribing to it. It's become a much more, how shall we say, executive operation of late, whereby they, if you don't agree with one or two who have established a committee, then you don't get your word in. These gardens are incredibly sensitive, and there's already been the nonsense of one of them that was subject to adverse possession. Though it was then listed as an asset of the Residents Association, but miraculously two of those residents then went and got an easement on the land and also did equity release, which I believe has now been repaired and repaid. But that should not ever have even been possible. And these are facts. So could I please have some comfort that all residents will be consulted and spoken to on this, because there is a clear division, and I am speaking on behalf of those residents who have had their voices shut down in the last couple of years, despite them having as much right as anyone else to the use of those gardens, which, whilst they historically have a lot of protection on them in form of covenants and statements, we've only got to look at the Pleasure Armoured site to see what a covenant is worth, or the Tivoli Woods site. So could we please ensure that all protections are, and that if they're disposed of and protected for the use that they were set out for when that square was set out, because they were set out as a public rest and leisure area. With regard to the marina swimming pool, the marina car park where the swimming pool was, isn't that on the proposals for overnight parking for campers, I thought? We seem to be trying to do, within our reviews, there was a talk of having an air-type system where people could pay to park their campers overnight, and I am, from recollection, I could be wrong, but the marina site was one of those. We're now getting rid of it. Which is it? Also, I do know that, because we've been talked about this, and I've talked about it with RTC over a number of years, we're pushing for something like this, because instead of the approach road through the tunnel being lined with what's starting to look more like shantytown by the day, they could be paying a tenner a night to use the marina car park. They're out of everyone's way, and they're not causing the problems that they are on the East Cliff. But instead of that, we put yet another asset for disposal in the hope that someone might want to build there. That's an asset that that ground was given to this community by Thompson and Wootton originally, who paid for the establishment of the marina swimming pool. OK, we lost that due to the mismanagement of TDC in 75, 76, and those of us that were here at the time remember it well. But it's since been poorly backfilled. It's there as what it is. Should we not be looking to use that for to solve the problems that have already been discussed, rather than just putting it on a disposal list as part of a fire sale? Thank you.
I'm going to let Councillor Bright come in and respond to your point about parking.
Yeah, that was my very, very initial concern until Ms Button reminded me that that particular car park cannot support the weight of camper vans. It's not suitable for camper van use. We are indeed trying to find additional camper van spaces for motorhomes, etc., but that wouldn't be suitable.
Right. I will come back and talk to you in a while about the future of that site, because I have some views on it. Councillor Austin, do you want to come in, as bearing in mind you're the ward councillor for Vale Square?
I agree with the concerns that Councillor Davis expressed about Vale Square. There is certainly some delicate work to be done with residents there to make sure that everybody is on board. What I actually wanted to mention was the Marina car park, just from the point of view of that as a resident of that end of Ramsgate, we really do lack leisure facilities, and it would be fabulous if that could be considered as part of the marketing plan. That's all.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Austin. And what I wanted to say, and I'll say to Councillor Davies too, I am very strongly in favour of that piece of land being used for leisure facilities. But what is proposed, as I understand it in this report, is a marketing exercise. It's not a decision, and a decision will come back. So we'll be able to see that. I think it would be disappointing if we just, much as we need housing in the districts, I think it will be disappointing if we put housing there, but I think we have to go out to market and see what there is. Ms Plant, do you want to talk to the issues around Vale Square in particular?
Thank you, Leader. So the report specifically identifies the specialist purchaser, which is the current licensee holder, and I think the report already recognises the designation of the land, and it will be sold as is with those designations and restrictions in place. We are just simply formalising the tenure into a long-standing freehold demise with all of the covenants, restrictions and rights that come with owning freehold.
Members? Councillor Bright?
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to quickly talk a little about Retort House, because I'm aware that there was some disquiet amongst some Broadstairs Town Council members about the speed in which we purchased Retort House, and then it went up for sale. And I fully understand how unfortunate it was that it deteriorated so quickly over the Christmas period. We knew, or the town council in Broadstairs knew, that it was in bad condition. They knew it was going to deteriorate quickly, and they didn't have the funds to do anything with it. It is a great shame, because it was a really useful, or it has a lot of potential as the only kind of indoor sports facility in Broadstairs. And I would just like to say, I would support someone coming in for it who would put it to a positive use.
I think in the recommendation you read out, Councillor Duckworth, you referred to Hartsdown Road, and I don't think that's actually in this report, so I think that's probably an error in the documentation. So I think we need to subtract that from...
Yeah, okay.
Andrew Plant. This is Ms Plant.
Thank you, Leader. I think Hartsdown Road is supplemented by the Marina car park marketing exercise. There is no Hartsdown Road in this paper.
Okay. Any other comments, members? No? All right. That's been moved and seconded then. So is that agreed? Thank you. And we move to item 9, which is the residential parking policy. Councillor Bright.
Everyone's so excited. Look, before I begin, I'd like to thank Miss Button and her parking team for the work they've done, and to thank the residents of Thanet for responding enthusiastically to the various consultations. Thanet is a district of stunning coastlines to which visitors flock in huge numbers every summer. Yet we know that in certain hotspots, particularly around Botany and Kingsgate Bays, inconsiderate parking can cause misery for those who live there. We're a district of quaint, narrow Georgian and Victorian streets that, while full of charm, were not designed for an era of two-car families and SUVs. When this administration came into office in 2023, we were resolved to tackle the multitude of parking issues throughout the district that have blighted the lives of residents for so long. And following the adoption of our parking strategy in December 2024, this is the first of the initial policy changes that I'll be bringing to Cabinet in the coming months. This residential parking policy sets out how the management of on-street parking is fair, evidence-based and supportive of both community needs and wider council objectives. Not only does it cover the introduction of resident parking areas, permit areas, it also covers general parking restrictions, including double yellow lines, on-street pay and display parking, disability parking, and bar markings. This policy was subject to consultation at the end of last year. The feedback was positive, with most people broadly agreeing with the policy. The overwhelming feedback was that the policy should include the voice of the individual, meaning that an individual can propose a scheme. Therefore, the trigger phase, which will be altered to include individual requests, which will be dealt with informally by making contact with the other residents and ward councillors to gauge support prior to the formal phase, where the viability of the scheme will be looked at. In short, the burden will no longer be on residents to canvass the opinion of their neighbours, which may have been a daunting barrier to making a viable request. I therefore move the recommendation that Cabinet agree to the adoption of the residential parking policy and the changed trigger phase.
Thank you, Councillor Bright. Have a seconder, please. Councillor Keane. Speaking under 20.1, Councillor Davies. Okay, thank you. Understood. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Leader. I just want to say we're really pleased to see this happening and want to thank the parking teams, Button, for all their work on it, and to say that, as we've said at scrutiny, etc., that the issue, as always with parking, is enforcement. So, you know, we're going to have a great policy, that's fantastic, but if we can't enforce it, then we're going to be rather worse off probably than we were. So the crucial thing is to get that right, and I know there's been a lot of efforts in that direction, but we're still a very long way from that, as the number of cars parked in Ramsgate Town Centre under the signs saying no parking at any time that can be seen every single evening attest. So yes, we've recruited some good people, but we really need to be getting them out there, and ideally we need to be looking at more of them and more happening, to that residents can see that we are enforcing our parking policies. Thank you.
Councillor Bright, do you want to come back on that?
Well, yeah, look, I think ultimately the problem isn't a lack of enforcement, it's a people parking inconsiderately. I mean, we could have, how many enforcement team do we need? I mean, we could have 50, 60, and they wouldn't be everywhere all the time. What I can say is that we are enforcing. We're enforcing probably more so than we have done in previous years. I don't know if, I haven't got the latest data on that, but I'm pretty confident. I know the first year saw I think a 40% uplift in enforcement notices. So we are taking action, just can't be everywhere all the time. And what I would also say to councillors is that they are welcome to email me with any particular hotspots that they want us to keep an eye on, and we will add that to the list.
Yeah, I have to say, Councillor Bright, I happened upon the the parking statistics page on the website earlier today, quite by accident. It is quite interesting, and I do recommend it to anybody who hasn't been there. But it does give the lie to the charge that we don't issue any tickets. It's got quite a lot of information on there, which is very useful. I'm not sure I totally agree with you, Councillor Austin, that enforcement is where it starts. I think it starts with having the right controls in place in the first place. So, but I think we all understand the frustrations. But as with one of our other problems, which is litter, you can keep throwing more and more resource at it. It's not necessarily the right way to deal with it, because in the end it's about public behaviour, and we have to manage public behaviour. Members, any comments? Councillor Keane?
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to say I'm really pleased to see the work that's been done on the parking permit schemes for residents, because it was quite prohibitive before in the numbers that people needed to get support from to bring a scheme forward. And I think this gives a lot more power to people to design their own schemes if they're viable. Thank you.
Councillor Alban?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I'll just support just what's said about I'm very pleased that for residents parking, it's going to be the council's duty to actually, if someone wants it, it's council's duty then to ensure that everybody locally there is notified for their views. The only the negative, I do have a negative with this, and it's certainly the case in Ramsgate, where there are resident parking, like in Wellington Crescent and all of that along there. That what that does is it pushes all the parking back to the small roads, and that is where we get a problem. And I do have to say that on quite a few occasions my ears have been ringing from Councillor Crittenden, who's been advocating that we try and do something with Staffordshire Street car park in Ramsgate, which I think should be looked at for residents parking, and I'm hoping that Councillor Bright will take my little jab there to maybe to have a look at that in his further reviews. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Whitehead?
Yeah, I've been contacted by many residents who are very excited about the potential of this, considering how busy Margate Central can get. So I'd just like to say thank you to Councillor Bright and to the parking team. It's much appreciated.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Councillor Orban, I was sitting next to you earlier before this meeting. You didn't say a word. What I would say is that I'm fully aware of Councillor Crittenden's suggestion, and it certainly sounds like something we could look at. But what this does is obviously give the framework and allow us to have consistency. I think some of the problems you have of those legacy residence parking schemes is that they were done kind of almost on an ad hoc basis with no overarching way of approaching it. Having this policy in place means that we can take a measured approach. And I would just like to also say to your point, Councillor Keane's point on allowing individuals to approach councillors or approach the council with suggestions, is that burden is very real when you consider that sometimes there's a bit of an antisocial behaviour element to some of the parking challenges certain residents meet, and they might actually feel quite vulnerable when it comes to actually having those conversations and canvassing their neighbours. They might be the very people causing the problems in the first place. So having this policy in place means that burden comes away from them. Officers can look at it through a sort of cooler lens and be able to make the appropriate adjustments.
Okay, Councillor Alban?
Yeah, can I just go back to Councillor Bright? I did sit next to him earlier on, but we were talking about something completely and utterly different, and I just thought I'm going to ask him when we're at council. Thank you.
Okay, members, I think we've exhausted that one.
That's okay.
Right, that's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Item 10 is the Thanet Regeneration Programme procurement decision with Councillor Duckworth.
Thank you, Leader. I'm pleased to present this report for approval at this meeting today as we prepare to go out to the market for the main contractor for one of our regeneration projects. This report sets out an overview of and recommendations for the proposed change to the procurement strategy for the Walpole Beach Facilities project, a key component of our broader Thanet regeneration programme funded by central government. The project aims to deliver essential public amenities at Walpole Bay, including a small cafe and toilets, providing space for commercial and community activities that connect our residents and visitors to the coastline. While Cabinet previously approved a procurement route using the dynamic purchasing system framework in July 2024, the project's evolution in scale and scope has necessitated a review of the procurement strategy. Following feedback from local contractors, we are now recommending a move to an open tender process via the Kent Business Portal, where any interested supplier can submit a bid. This revised procurement strategy will ensure a transparent and competitive process which is suited to the current market and project requirements, ultimately supporting the timely delivery of these improved facilities for the Cliftonville community. The appropriateness of making this change has been fully discussed and agreed with the Council's procurement team and in consultation with legal services. I'd like to ask Cabinet to authorise the change in procurement route for the Thanet Regeneration Programme project, the Walpole Beach Facilities, formerly Pavilion Works, contract. This involves changing from the planned procurement route, which was to use the London Construction Programme dynamic purchasing system, to an open tender process via the Kent Business Portal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duckworth. Seconder, Councillor Alban. No speakers under 20.1. Any comments, members? It's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. And we move on to item 11, the notice of motion regarding the sanctuary movement. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Leader. This report recommends that Cabinet agree to, firstly, join the City of Sanctuary Local Authority Network and commit to working towards the City of Sanctuary Local Authority Award by incorporating a new City of Sanctuary framework within the Thanet Housing, Homelessness and Rough Sleeping Strategy when it is next reviewed later in 2026. The adoption of the new Thanet Housing, Homelessness and Rough Sleeping Strategy will be a matter for the full Council. Secondly, note the consultation response submitted to the Government following the publication of the consultation paper, A Fairer Pathway to Resettlement. Finally, lobby central government to permanently extend the notice period to leave Home Office accommodation to 56 days following the granting of leave to remain. Full Council considered my notice of motion regarding the sanctuary movement at its meeting held on the 9th of October 2025. The notice of motion read as follows. This Council already recognises the importance of our duties in being a place of safety, committed to the support and inclusion of all of our residents. However, formal recognition of the actions that are enshrined in our duties is important, at a time when our communities are being encouraged to divide rather than engage with the vulnerabilities that we all have and the challenges that we could all one day face. With that in mind, this Council publicly recognises the need for Thanet to promote the welfare and inclusion of all people fleeing violence, persecution, or who are isolated and seeking safety, the importance of supporting the vulnerable, the homeless, the isolated, and all residents in need, the positive contribution made in our local communities by refugees and those seeking asylum or safety. This Council therefore resolves to join the network of cities and towns which promote the inclusion and welfare of people fleeing violence and persecution and become a recognised city of sanctuary. Promote the inclusion and welfare of all who find themselves homeless, destitute or isolated. Continue to be a welcoming place of safety for all by encouraging integration, community cohesion, and challenging discrimination and discriminatory language of all kinds in all forms by politicians of all parties. Continue to promote diversity through recognition and celebration of our different cultures and communities across Thanet. Encourage other anchor institutions and key stakeholders to become part of the City of Sanctuary movement. And to bring back a report to Cabinet within 3 months outlining what practical steps this Council will take to embed the core values of City of Sanctuary into our services and how we can further link into communities and organisations working towards the same aims, and address the pressure placed on councils and those granted asylum by the proposed shortening of time allocated to find permanent accommodation. Finally, respond to the upcoming government consultation announced in the May 2025 Immigration White Paper, with specific focus on the challenges faced by the survivors of violence against women and girls, the rights of those seeking asylum to work and contribute to their communities, and the proposed changes to the status of indefinite leave to remain. Council debated the motion and has therefore been referred to Cabinet for determination. There have been some very confusing assertions made around this motion by representatives and members of some political parties, Reform in particular, as well as some fairly huge inaccuracies passed off as truth around the reality of housing and asylum. Considering that in the last week I have been told by some political representatives, members and residents that A, 100% of all of our new council housing goes to those seeking asylum, B, that 25% of our new council housing goes to those seeking asylum, and C, that all new housing built in Thanet goes to those seeking asylum, I think it's worth discussing the facts of housing as it relates to asylum. These are the facts. They may not suit the agendas of some, but the truth is often not comfortable for those who seek to manipulate narratives. To access permanent social housing in Thanet, applicants must apply to the Thanet Housing Register. To be eligible to apply, applicants must have been resident in the district for 3 years, unless the council has accepted a statutory homelessness duty or the applicant is a veteran. Again, in contradiction to many claims on social media, Thanet has actually strengthened our housing priority and accessibility for veterans, or if they are fleeing domestic abuse from a home in another council area. Asylum seekers without leave to remain have no recourse to public funds and are therefore not eligible for housing services. They are ineligible for both the housing register and homelessness services. So to make it perfectly clear, those applying for asylum cannot even apply to the housing register to access council housing. We currently have 1,334 households on the Thanet Housing Register, of which 0.7%, are from households with a leave to remain immigration status. In other words, asylum has been granted and leave to remain has been granted. To be eligible for the housing register, asylum seeker households must have had their asylum application determined and been given leave to remain. In addition, of the 852 households for whom the council accepted a homelessness prevention or relief duty in the year to 31st of March 2025, 22 households, 2.6%, had been granted refugee status. To sum up, those seeking asylum cannot even apply for the housing register, let alone be granted council housing. Only 0.7% of those applying to the Thanet Housing Register are individuals that have been granted asylum and leave to remain, and only 2.6% of our homelessness prevention or relief cases involve households who have been granted asylum. So to the many, many messages I've received telling me that this is about communities who do not live here, or that we are overwhelmed by supporting those who are already with us and need support, no and no. I have also been told that a simple pledge to care for vulnerable groups, in line with our equality provisions, should have been open to public consultation. What this assertion brings us to is a very simple reality. You do not consult on whether to adhere to basic human rights. As a council, we do not consult on whether to withdraw basic respect and decency from how we work with our community, and as a Labour administration, we do not consult on whether everyone deserves basic human kindness and consideration. It is right to fight for the rights of others. It is right to care for and love others, especially those in need. It is a core tenet of all major religions and humanist thought. It is right to make active effort to include those in need in our society. And to be clear, no matter how many insults are thrown at me, I will not ever be debating whether or not human beings have a right to a happy, healthy, well-supported life. They do. Joining the Sanctuary movement allows us to work with existing support structures, existing communities, existing needs, so that across the country we build a wide network of resources and understanding in how best to support others and how best to build communities that not only accept but respect and value difference. There will never be anything wrong in supporting vulnerable communities. If you find yourself opposing a motion that does nothing other than support kindness, understanding and community, I suggest you look very, very hard at why kindness to some is so very unpleasant for you to even consider. I move the recommendations set out in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Can I have a second? Councillor Bright, thank you. Speaking under 20.1, Councillor Wing.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to Helen. Councillor Whitehead, I had the pleasure of walking through Ellington Park on Saturday morning and actually stopped to talk to one of our homeless guys and actually bought him his breakfast, and then somebody else bought the other homeless guy breakfast. So I decided I'd sit and have my vegetarian sausage sandwich with them, and it was great to hear how they're benefiting from the homeless shelter in St Lawrence. I had half an hour chatting with them, which was pleasant. So I just want to thank you for continuing to find ingenious ways in our housing department of supporting our most vulnerable and speaking to the truth. I've just come from one of the most dangerous cities in the world, London. I've wandered around for 3 days. Nobody's taken my bag, nobody's said anything negative to me, so I think it is important we take every opportunity to call out the misinformation that is out there that is being used to divide our communities. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wing. That's very much appreciated.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's a very interesting discussion, this. I'm not quite sure what the financial implications are. And I'm going to sound very... I'm not going to repeat everything I've said on this before because we've had a fairly long discussion. But I will remind members that when the Iranian uprising took place in 1977, we welcomed those people. The Vietnamese boat people arrived in 1980. We housed and accommodated them. We did the same with the Eastern Europeans in the 90s, many of whom have settled here and remain and are now second and even third generations. And of course this century the Ukrainians are very much in need of our support. So I think we have a situation where we can be extremely proud of how accommodating, welcoming and non-judgmental we are as a community in Thanet. And it's important that we address that, which is why I'm questioning why we need to... I don't understand the need for this, because is it virtue signalling or what? Because if it's going to cost us money to do what we're already doing and just to say that we're doing it, then is it valid? Also, the report itself says 0.7% of our people on the housing list are from this category. 0.7%. That in itself shows that we are not overrun, and I totally agree with the councillor when she says about this, and I think there's too much propaganda and people stirring pots around. But I really do question why we feel the need to, and there is obviously an implication in terms of costs, but what's the overall cost of this, and where's the benefit where we could be using that money to enhance the support that we give to people genuinely in need, instead of just paying out to join a club and wear a badge.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. The point of the Sanctuary Network is very much to make sure that, well, it's the same reason that we speak to other councils about the way that they do things. So you tap into organisations, other councils who have experience, who have networks, who have done work in this area before, so that we are not in a situation where we're repeating work that has been done before, or we are allocating resources to follow projects that have already been well established in many councils across the country. It's allowing us access to work that has already been done by many volunteer groups, many councils, many cities, to support integration and to support those who might be vulnerable in a way that is kind of the opposite to your argument, in that it's specifically designed for councils to be able to access work that's already there. So the aim is not to create specialist services, but it's to look at how we coordinate within our departments. So, for instance, previously, in terms of housing, when we've been working specifically with vulnerable minorities such as gypsies and travellers, we have worked to make connections across departments so that we know that we are meeting the needs of people. So it's how we work as a council and how we combine that work with the work of volunteer groups, how we combine that work with the work of communities. Being part of that network is very important because it allows us to access that. I very much don't see it as a badge, but I think it's important that we acknowledge that the reason that we're doing this is, as you said, the fact that we have some horrendously divisive monologuing happening at the moment. And I am not one to do things with no purpose. I am very much somebody who likes to just get things done. But the reality is that when we have an external dialogue and a very mainstream dialogue that continually reinforces incorrect and negative messaging around asylum and around immigration, not only does that make people more vulnerable, which means that we have even more of a responsibility towards them in terms of our approaches to equality, but it means that we are tackling more than supporting people in a cohesive community. We are actively tackling a system that seeks to damage them. That's why it's important to state what we're doing at this point, because within my lifetime, I have never known a narrative this unpleasant and this extreme in relation to asylum and immigration. And I agree fully that we have been very welcoming as an area on the whole, across various points, but obviously much of that is before my time, but I have never known such a visceral and unpleasant atmosphere around asylum and immigration, which is why, considering that we are a port where people land when they need safety, considering that we do encompass Manston, considering that we do care for members of immigrant and asylum communities here, it's very clear that we have to show that as a council we understand the stresses that they're under and we do support them.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. I'd like to welcome Councillor Garner. I appreciate that you've been at another meeting, and so we won't take offence at you not being here. I'm going to call Councillor Yates, and then I'm going to call you, but I just thought I'd let you know that I will call you. Councillor Yates.
Thank you, Leader. We support the principle of Thanet Council receiving a City Sanctuary Award. At the same time, transparency is important, and this report does raise a number of questions. Prior to the meeting, I spoke to former TDC Councillor Aaron Morph and bosses and managers of the local refugee organisation, so I want to add their context and ask 3 questions. So this Labour government's white paper consultation, it's important to know, has been boycotted by over 300 refugee, migrant and civil society organisations. And there is real anger over the compulsory volunteering, the 10-year settlement rules, and the complete failure to mention young people or children even once in the white paper. A refugee volunteer manager messaged me today saying that this Labour white paper could lead to some refugees being in limbo status for 20 years, with reviews every 30 months, and at any point they may have their country deemed to be safe to return and be uprooted. This will cause chaos for renting, employment, university places, and could well increase homelessness rate for those individuals. Former TDC councillor Aaron Morph says, I hope Thanet Council approaches both of our MPs to ask the Home Secretary to reconsider the position of people already in our country before new changes are ruled out retrospectively. 10 years is a long time, he says, especially for people who wish to set up a business, apply for a mortgage, take out a loan. If these individuals have children, they may face a situation where their children are British, but they are not. So our first question is, where is TDC's response to the white paper consultation that is mentioned in this report? Will Cabinet publish it, as we can't seem to find a copy of it in this paper? I worry on the one hand, TDC may be supporting this Labour government's white paper that has been boycotted by so many refugee support organisations, and on the other hand, want to receive a City of Sanctuary award while supporting such a white paper consultation. Our second question is about the City of Sanctuary award criteria. It states that local refugee support organisations should be involved in the City of Sanctuary award process from the start. So I spoke to all the managers of the local refugee support organisations today who do work in Thanet. There is a handful of them. None of them have had any contact from TDC about this award process. Why haven't we contacted these organisations at the start, which is in accordance with the City of Sanctuary award criteria? This is 3 months after the City of Sanctuary motion was brought to full council. So I'm disappointed that no contact has been made to these organisations who do work day in, day out in Thanet. Will TDC finally approach them about what specific support they want, because they're dealing with this in the coalface? Lastly, last question. Given that this council puts an emphasis on young people and that we do have child refugees being supported locally, will Cabinet consider supporting the white paper amendment drawn up by Labour peer Alf Dubs? This looks to ensure that children of a qualifying familial tie, be it sibling, uncle, aunt or grandparent, would gain a streamlined path to stability and safety on British soil. So will Cabinet add this to section 3 of the recommendations? They lobby government on both the 56-day notice period and in support of the Alf Dubs amendments protecting young people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Yates. I have to say I find that a rather extraordinary response, considering that the reason the white paper was included was you requested it within your altered motion. So you're simultaneously saying we should have boycotted it, but you asked us to do it.
Where is the consultation response?
This isn't a debate, Councillor Yates, as you know. Let Councillor Whitehead respond.
So you specifically altered my motion to include a response to the white paper. So we responded to the white paper. You are now saying that we should have boycotted it when you asked us to fill it in. So to be clear, we did as you asked within your alteration to the motion, and we filled in that. So you trying to portray at this point that we have somehow betrayed groups by not boycotting it when you asked for it is a very, very strange thing to do.
I don't ask for it to be boycotted. You're misrepresenting me.
Councillor Yates, please.
You specifically said, why have we filled that in when other groups have boycotted it? Yes, you did.
Right, I think Councillor Whitehead needs to move on to the next point. I think you've made your point on that.
So we filled it in because you asked us to. We're happy to publish our response. I'm also happy to publish my response. I responded individually. I do have to say it does mention children. I can't say that it is an effective consultation in any way whatsoever. I can't say that the choices given in terms of the majority of it being multiple choices was at all useful in terms of describing the challenges that people face. But it has been filled in regardless, and I'm more than happy to share both the TDC version and my version. In terms of engagement with organisations, we haven't begun this process yet. This is the beginning of the process. I would like to point out, however, that when this was brought previously, you mentioned 2 organisations and said that you could not identify them to us because they weren't to be named on police advice. You have had several months since that point to come to me, to speak to me about them, and that has not happened. Yes, but the point is you don't want to give that information, Councillor Yates. Excellent, I'm thrilled. So we are, of course, going to be working with those organisations, but the motion wasn't the beginning of this process. And I also spoke to Councillor Orff last week, so It's interesting that he hasn't made the same requests of me, but I'm happy to consider any that he does make. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor White. Before I call Councillor Garner, I'd just like to be clear, because I think the report says that Council voted on this motion. Council did not vote on this motion. It was not a motion for Council to vote on. Council voted to debate the motion, and having voted to debate the motion, it comes to Cabinet. So no decision was taken on the motion at Council. It comes here for decision, and until that decision has been taken, nothing has happened. Councillor Garner.
Thank you, and thank you for accommodating me, despite the fact that I was at another meeting in Broadstairs. I haven't necessarily come along here to make a lot of points or to make a speech about the motion. I'm broadly in agreement with the motion, obviously. I do want to echo something that Councillor Whitehead said, which I have heard since I came in, about the rather, I think it's my word, I'm going to use my word, the rather rancid environment that asylum is being discussed. And I think it's important for those of us who do support this motion that we have our disagreements maybe about various bits to do with this, but it's important that we do show solidarity for each other. I was unfortunate enough earlier today to dip into a rather awful Facebook discussion on this motion, which was a total and utter misrepresentation of what it is, with various people, some of whom were elected and should know a great deal better than to stoke up these sort of fears, although that is part of their remit, I know. And I'm glad there aren't a lot of people here. I was maybe expecting there might be people here, so that's why I thought it was important that as many of us come here and stand together when we're faced with this sort of thing, put any small p political differences aside, because we are mainly in the same place on this. So like I say, I haven't got a lot else to say, but I'm just expressing, I'm sure we all agree, our solidarity. We're on the right side.
Thank you, Councillor Garner. That's very much how I feel about this. I don't see that there is anything negative in this. I also don't see that there's anything positive about trying to find political point scoring within that, because as a council we have to focus on moving this forward and making sure that it provides something meaningful for the area. I'm very appreciative that you came. Like you, I had been told in very unpleasant terms that many people would be turning up to say many things to me. So it's much appreciated that you came. For confirmation of what I said earlier, the criteria does specifically say that the first thing is council agreeing to sign up. So the first thing that happens is we will bring this to council. If council then agree to sign up, that's when we start working with the network and start engaging. I obviously want to work with anyone related to this, because it is nothing without the community groups who are directly working with people. So I would be very happy to have many, many conversations with you, Councillor Yates, about the people who would like to come forward. And right. Thank you very much.
Members. Councillor Bright. Oh, I've got two lists. Yeah. I apologise.
Am I on the second list, Councillor Everett? I would have thought I'd been on the first list. There we go. I just wanted to add solidarity with Councillor Whitehead in this regard, and to point out that, as Councillor Davis said, Thanet has always been a place of refuge. Indeed, it's part of our crest in Ramsgate. And the key thing about this that doesn't seem to be appreciated by all those trolls on social media is that this isn't actually about the colour of your skin or your gender or where you came from, whether you arrived in a small boat or whether you came from Maidstone with a dodgy partner who turned out to be violent. It's about quote, the vulnerable, the homeless and all residents in need, all who are isolated and seeking safety. It supports our violence against women and girls policy. It is about making Thanet a safe and welcoming place, whoever you are. I cannot understand how anybody uses that to seek to divide us or to divide our community. I have no understanding of how people can build an argument around this and suggest that this is a negative thing to be doing. But I absolutely agree that the need for this and the need for us to be sharing good practice with other organisations and other councils sadly gets greater every day. I'm thoroughly supportive of the proposals about the 56-day notice period and very worried about the tenor of recent work from the government on this, and I do hope that our councillors from the Labour group can be working with our MP and others to try to get across the real life experience of people in Thanet, because it isn't like that and it shouldn't be like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. I have to admit, in relation to especially online dialogue, I have also been very, very puzzled by the number of people saying, what are you doing for us in relation to this? Because the entire point of this motion is to recognise what we have tried to do as an administration from day one. We have focused on rough sleeping and complex rough sleeping. We now have our first permanent home for our shelter so that we can support those who are most in need. We have focused on bringing people back who've been placed out of area. We have 76% of them back now in a year. We are focused on providing energy efficient homes, more council homes. We have focused on ensuring that we do actually address the needs of gypsy and travellers within our area. From start to finish, all of this has been about supporting many different groups, many different vulnerabilities, and that includes everyone. So for this to be seen as a very singular thing is very confusing, because it is very much not an exclusive thing. It is a recognition of all of our humanity and the fact that we should, and we do very often as an area, work very well together to care for each other. And that is what I would like people to take from this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Bright, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Councillor Davis earlier mentioned virtue signalling, and I think we've just seen from Councillor Yates' attack a rather predictable example of that. I think your Green colleagues, Councillor Yates, are quite right when they say that us progressives, or we progressives, need to be standing shoulder to shoulder on this stuff. But this is a positive step from the council, and I want to stick to that. It's ancient history now, but a couple of years ago, I was lucky enough to be the mayor of Broadstairs. And one of the things that we started to do was to go into schools and colleges and just talk about what it is a councillor does as part of kind of community days at the various schools. And during one talk, a young man from Ukraine asked me the question of where we take shelter when we're attacked. And I've got to say that moment really hit me hard, because it just brought home how fragile people's lives are. And obviously that young man had been here for a couple of years. He's probably still here making his life. So I support any kind of shortening of that length of leave to remain. But overall, I'd like to thank Councillor Whitehead for bringing this motion to Council. In today's national climate of division and intolerance, I think it was a really brave thing to do. I think it was also the right thing to do, and I was really proud of this council, there was no vote, but pretty much every person who stood up and spoke on the night in this chamber spoke in support of your motion, and that was across the chamber. So I think that's really important. I think joining the City of Sanctuary Network is about affirming the decent, compassionate values that I think the vast majority of people in Thanet have, and I think it addresses what what we want to achieve as a community. So yeah, I'm not going to waffle on, otherwise I fall into a trap of banging on and on. So I just wanted to offer my full support.
Councillor Alban?
Yeah, maybe I'm going to go a bit too far here, Chair, but obviously I'm fully supportive of this, and I'm fully supportive of all the comments that's been made. If we don't do something like this, if we don't all stand together, and if we don't call out the people who are saying the wrong thing and are stirring up hatred, you end up with somewhere where I went last October, to Auschwitz and Dachau, and Birkenau, and if you've never been there, you need to go, and everybody needs to go there to see what can happen if we don't stand together and shout down this vitriol of against people because they happen to want to be in this country, but no matter how they get here, whatever. We need to sort out. We need to stand up, and we need to answer these people, and we need to keep answering these people until such time as they will understand. Because if we don't, you end up with what happened back in the 40s of the last century, and we can't allow that to happen. Visiting those two places had such an impact on me, an impact on everybody that I was with, and it might sound far-fetched as we sit here, but that is what happens if we don't stop it. Thank you, Chair.
I want to say that I think this motion is about values as much as it's about policy, and I think it is important that we give a clear statement of what our values are. Councillor Davis referred to virtue signalling. I don't have a problem with virtue signalling when we're in a climate where there's a great deal of hate signalling. I think we have to make the opposite case. And one of the challenges we have is communicating facts and framing our policies and our arguments around realities rather than myths. So I think that over and above the purpose of the motion itself, it has been very useful that a report has been written, and I give Mr Porter credit for this, which sets out some facts around asylum seekers and around people with the right to remain in terms of our housing policy. We've also had to deal in recent months with a story which was not founded in facts. Councillor Davis, you gave an interview with Nigel Farage on GBTV or whatever it is about that. GB News, yeah. It's not a channel I watch very much, as you won't be surprised to hear. But you did say in that Farage asked you why the council had entered into this some sorts of apparent proposal to let new council housing to asylum seekers, and you said, well, I don't know, it must be virtue signalling. Not only was it not virtue signalling, but this administration knew nothing about it. There was never an offer from this council to let new council houses or to build new council houses and accommodate asylum seekers. They couldn't be under current legislation anyway. And we have never been part of a pilot project to introduce that. So all the reporting which has been done around that, and the Thanet Extra put a story on its front page which was couched in a way that was certainly misleading based on the facts, if not dishonest in its entirety. And that kind of thing is what aggravates people in the community when they think that others are being put in front of them and their needs. We are a welcoming society, we're a welcoming local authority, and where people come to Thanet and have a right to be here, we will treat them in a welcoming and responsible way, and we will treat them equally with other people who have a right to be here. But we can't accommodate the world, and we're not going to try. And we are not part of any pilot to let council housing to asylum seekers. I also want to say that you refer to East Europeans, Councillor Davis. I think we need to remember that not all migrants are refugees, and I think we have to recognise the contribution that migrants have made to our economy in particular, and continue to make to our economy as well as our public services. And I will say, since former Councillor Rolfe has been mentioned, you couldn't get a better example of somebody who's come here from a very difficult situation, and he is an outstanding example of someone who contributes to our society. Whether we always agree with him politically or not, he's a great symbol of what can be achieved by people coming to this country, and I commend him for that. So I am fully supportive of this motion, and I congratulate Councillor Whitehead, not just the time and effort that she's put into it, but her obvious emotional commitment to it, and her willingness to challenge those who seek to divide us, who use false information and fake news to do that. And I think the more that we can do of that collectively, the better off we'll be. Members, anything further to say? Motion has been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Can I thank everybody for their time this evening? I don't like cabinet meetings which go on more than 2 hours, and I'm sure officers would all like to get home after a long day here. Thank you very much, everybody.